Oh, yeah.
I have one more comment. I love the ordinance as it is. But the problem I'm having is that we have an ordinance right now that we're not enforcing. So, as problematic as this ordinance is, I think we need to do something to address the fact that right now we have a law in the books in the village of Riverwoods that everyone's kind of thumbing their nose at.
That's why we've got to compromise rather than
So,
making changes.
you know, we either, because I think that those people that have deer fences should, you know, should be a little concerned. Because right now, they're basically illegal. And while everyone's been turning the other way, now that this has been brought to the attention of the board, as a board, we have an obligation to all of the village to enforce the laws. And we're not doing that right now. And that's a big problem for me from a fiduciary capacity, sitting as a board member, because there's some other resident in the village who's saying, I'm sure, why isn't Haber enforcing the laws? That's a problem, okay? But this is clearly a law that I do not want to enforce. But I'm one of these strict constructionists. And there's a law out there, and the law says, you gotta do this. I'm a lawyer, and I follow the law, I gotta do this, unless this law is modified in some respect. So I think we need to really seriously consider either making a change and getting some kind of compromise that works, or putting a moratorium on enforcing the law, so that we as a board, at least during this period of time, passes some ordinance, resolution, something that says we are going to put a moratorium on the enforcement of the fence law vis-a-vis deer fences.
Michael?
Otherwise, I have just a personal concern that we are not complying with our duties as elected officials in the village of Riverwoods.
Okay. Me next, one comment with regard to that. Michael, if we put a moratorium on the enforcement of the fence ordinance, then not only are we grandfathering, as it were, every existing deer fence, we are leaving it open for any person who wants to start construction of any kind of fence that he wants. Yeah, we do.
No,
If you
the
put a-
moratorium could be strictly written so that it basically says it's for a period of 6 months or something, while the village continues to consider the issue of fencing, the fencing ordinance, and at the same time, it says no new deer fences should be put up until this issue is resolved. So our moratorium can be strictly written to cover all those situations.
And there's
Yeah, to basically preserve the status quo, exactly.
And there's one more statement, and I have no objection to that, very frankly. I really don't. I'd like to see an ordinance on the books. But
It's only putting off the inevitable. So
I know,
you're right.
I know.
We have
I
to
know.
do something.
We have to
Oh,
do
of course,
something. But the other statement is that the people who have been coming to our board meetings are people who either have deer fences, are involved in forest protection or garden protection, and oftentimes deer fences don't protect forest at all. They protect landscaping. What the board is not hearing from the other half of the village, and those are the people who don't want the deer fences.
I agree.
And-
That's why I'm worried.
And I have a concern that the impression that's coming out of these meetings is pretty much from one side and one side only. And that concerns me too, because I think that people who have not been notified by the RPC, or who have a deer fence, or who have an ox that's being gored in one way or another, and who don't know what's been going on here, have not been coming to these meetings. So they've been very one-sided. That concerns me too, because as a board member, I represent everybody.
I'm going to instruct our council to draft a 90-day moratorium.
No, we want to get this done, Lynn. We can't.
I don't want to go 6 months.
It can always be
There's no
redone.
way, There's no way I'm gonna go 6 months on this thing. No way, sir.
I'd like to respond to some of the comments that have been made here.
No, hold it.
I'm sorry?
Hold it. I'm gonna cut you off for a minute.
Bill, some issues have been raised that I'd like to add information to, please. Grant me 5 minutes, please.
I'll give you 3.
Okay. The Plan Commission heard from one wildlife expert, Marty Jones of
Well,
IDNR.
you're just rehashing the same thing over.
No, I
again.
want to quote, because this issue of herding,
You know what? It's not important right now. It really isn't.
Bill, I beg to differ.
It's not gonna make any difference today.
You know, one of the things that if you have people that are very concerned about this issue, rushing through without deliberation,
rushing
Bill,
through.
I think is a mistake.
I'd like to have somebody else heard it.
Well, I've listened to all the other trustees. I was patient.
I'd like to have somebody else heard it.
I don't understand what that means.
I'd like to hear from Chuck Stewart. Wake up.
Thank you. Timing's all right. I'll just make a couple of general comments, I think. We talked about aesthetics. One of the issues with aesthetics is everybody's aesthetic value is different, so it's kind of hard to pin that down. So I try to look at, it's a factor, but I try to look at, functional things. One of the things that struck me was when Cheryl was talking about the comprehensive plan and the protection of wildlife. Well, it seems to me that when you look at deer management, there's 2 ways to approach that. You manage it for the benefit of the deer, or you manage it for the benefit of the people. And I think a good number of the studies that we see about carrying capacity and all that are based on management for the benefit of the deer. In other words, too many deer, not enough forage, declining health in the deer, all those kind of issues. Okay, so when you look at deer management in a remote forest land someplace, it's a little different issue, I think, when you take a look at deer management in an urban arena. Okay, so I think there's some basic factors there that need to be thought about. I look at our role in this process is explaining to the best we can to the board what the issues are that we have to confront. Woodland health as a broader general sort of a thing. People's gardens, all these other sorts of things. But my job is to suggest to the best I can what the bag of tools we have available to use to that process is. And then the people, the board that makes the policy, that's their job, is to put that into that place and do that. So when you look at one of my thing about one of my main issues with deer fences is how they're constructed. And an awful lot of them are just nailed to the tree because it's a little more efficient, a little easier. And I prefer that if deer fences come about, that was part of the issue that wouldn't be done. I think the question of whatever terminology you use, whether it's channeling or herding or whatever all it is, to me the math is basically pretty simple. You have X amount of acres of forage, if you will, and that could be natural plants, it could be garden plants, it could be vegetable garden, whatever it all is. My wife has just about all of those varieties in our yard that are foraged upon. So, but to me, it's pretty basic math. If you have 10 acres and you fence off 5 of it, you got acres. Let's say you got X number of deer, you're still going to have X number of deer in 5 acres instead of 10. So you are going to concentrate in some way, shape, or form. I think what was interesting to me was the conversation we had a little bit earlier about the deer counts and all that sort of thing. And I would like to see an explanation from Ryerson as to the methodology as to what if they culled the number they culled in